client finds the property through our platform, we do the mortgage financing. So we will introduce the property manager at the right time and say, hey, by the way, you can find the right property manager to help you manage this property. So we'll kind of introduce you in the right point in that journey to make sure that you have a high conversion as well.
All right. I'm Jason Hole, the founder and CEO of DoorGrow, the world's leading and most comprehensive coaching and consulting firm for long-term residential property management entrepreneurs. For over a decade and a half, we have brought innovative strategies and optimization to the property management industry. At DoorGrow, we have spoken to thousands of property management business owners, coached, consulted, and cleaned up hundreds of businesses, helping them add doors, improve pricing, increase profit, simplify operations, and build and replace teams. We are like bar rescue for property managers. We have rebranded over 300 businesses, and we run the leading property management mastermind with more video testimonials and reviews than any other coach or consultant in the industry. And if you are wanting help with any of that stuff, then reach out to us at DoorGrow. So we believe at DoorGrow that good property managers can change the world, and that property management is the ultimate high trust gateway to real estate deals, relationships, and residual income. At DoorGrow, we are on a mission to transform property management business owners and their businesses. We want to transform the industry, eliminate the BS, build awareness, change perception, expand the market, and help the best property management entrepreneurs win. Now, let's get into the show. All right, so my guest today, I'm hanging out with Amresh Singh. Welcome to the DoorGrow Show.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's good to have you. So I would love to get into your background so people understand, like, who are they listening to or viewing on this? And tell us a little bit about your journey into entrepreneurism and how you kind of got started, and that will lead us into your business.
Awesome. So my background has been at the intersection of mortgages and technology. I used to work for a leading international bank before I started HomeAbroad and Ziffy. Originally, I'm from India, so I moved to the US 10 years back, working for this big bank who moved me from India to the US to work closer to the headquarters over here. I managed their international customer acquisition. And, in that journey, I realized that two things that we have, or I should say two really fascinating things about the US real estate market, which is 30-year fixed rate mortgages, which we in the US, we tend to ignore and we take it for granted. It does not exist in most places around the world. It's a superpower, 30-year fixed rate mortgages, right?
Yeah.
Plus, combine that with, high rental yields in the US market, you're really looking at a true wealth building tool, right? So that realization coming from, an international market into the US market, seeing the superpower of the, how real estate in the US can really help you build generational wealth, gave me the idea to start HomeAbroad, which was a company that was focused on global investors investing in US real estate market, right? And taking the advantages of, some of these superpowers I'll speak later in your podcast, right? But that's how the journey started. And then, as part of that journey, we realized, some similar gaps exist in the domestic market as well. That led to formation of Ziffy, which I'll talk about as well as we progress in the podcast. So that's kind of in a nutshell, my entrepreneurial journey, my background, Jason.
Very cool. I've noticed, every now and then I get clients that they've got some special connection to an international market. I've got a client from Israel, and he pull in Israeli investors, and they're wanting to get into the U.S. market, and he helps them handle all of that. I had a client that same thing with China, and other different foreign countries, and so that's a competitive advantage that each of these property management business owners have, but it's not one that every property manager can just create because they don't know a different language. They don't have a network or connections overseas. And so that could be a challenge, but I see how that could be a competitive advantage for building up your own portfolio if you could access international investors. And I didn't really realize that, but I just grew up in this bubble of the U.S., but 30-year fixed rate mortgages sound so normal.
Yep.
Okay, so cool. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going on.
Yeah, so, as I mentioned, we operate two brands. HomeAbroad is where we started, right? And that's a shop that's a PropTech and FinTech shop that's focused on helping global investors invest in the US real estate market, right? If you think about, real estate, right, it's kind of, wealth building tool or is a mode of building generational wealth around the world. People invest in real estate for stability, right? For, that ease of mind. Okay, my investment is going to grow, right? But, in most places around the world, when you're investing in real estate, you're not doing that with leverage. You're buying that in cash, and your, mode for return on that investment is really banking on the capital appreciation on that property, right? What changes in the US market is because of 30-year fixed rate mortgages. There's no payment shock, or the rate is fixed for the term of the loan. That's 30 years. Since it's amortized for a 30-year period, your monthly payments are lower, right? Rental yields are higher. So what ends up happening in the US market is rent covers mortgage in majority of the
Cash
scenario.
flows.
Yeah, it
We
cash
love
flows
cash
day
flow.
one. Absolutely, right? And that is something. So think about it, right? So you are generating cash flow from day one with leverage. I'll repeat that, with leverage, right? So 25% of your money is able to help you buy 100% of the property with cash flow or passive income from day one. It just does not happen in most places around the world. Now imagine this. You explain this to someone who has no idea about the real estate market, right? And then you tell them, hey, not only the value prop, but as a company, Home Abroad, we're going to give you mortgage financing with no US credit history, right? And we are going to underwrite you not based on your personal income or assets from your home country. We're going to look at the property's income, right? And we're going to underwrite based on that, right? So suddenly, someone who has no affiliation with the U.S., market or financial market is able to invest or buy U.S. real estate for the obvious benefits I mentioned, right? Cash flow with leverage, but also you're putting your money in the largest economy in the world. USD is still the reserve currency, right? So you're shielding yourself from currency risk that might exist in your home country, right? And suddenly, when you explain this to a global investor, it's an aha moment for them, right? Because this is something that does not exist in their home market. They want to kind of diversify their assets and dip into what US has to offer. This kind of opening American dream to the world
Yeah.
without them having to live or work in the US. You can live and work in your home country and dip into what America or American dream has to offer, while you sit in your home country, right? And that's kind of what was a game-changing phenomena for us. Great traction, great, results. But what we saw, Jason, these people were coming in and we're like, okay, great. I want to invest in US real estate market, but I don't know where to invest, right? I don't know the US market. I don't know which city to invest in, right? And my team, we found ourselves going onto Zillow, doing investment analysis and coming back to them and saying, okay, this is a good place to invest. And then we said, okay, wait a minute, let's just build a tech platform. And that's where it led to evolution of Ziffy, which is kind of, Zillow for investment properties, Ziffy.ai, where, as an investor, you can kind of just say, okay, this is my investment objective. I want to generate X dollar cash flow every month. I want to generate Y% in rental yield. I want to find already rented properties. And our algorithm mines everything that is listed on MLS right now from an investment perspective, gives you detailed investment analysis and helps you take the data-driven decision. And then we realized only 8% of Americans own investment properties. If it's such a good thing that global investors want to put their money in the US real estate market, why Americans are not building generational wealth by investing in real estate, right? Because people don't want to be a landlord, right?
Right.
But once you put this data in front of them, suddenly the perspective changes. And that's what we are right now. We are launching Ziffy.ai, where it's going to be the Zillow for investment properties to really help more Americans buy and invest in US real estate.
Okay, great. And what's that tool called?
It's Ziffy, Ziffy.ai.
Z.ai. Okay. And you mentioned the big other Z name, Zillow. You're trying to take their lunch, I guess, right? We'll see how.
No, not really. If you think about it, Zillow is focused on primary market, right? It's
Yes.
a much bigger market, right? And, investment, of course, is 16% of the real estate transactions are investment properties, right? But having said that, it's a huge market and there's a lot of, scope for growth because a lot of Americans still, what they don't know about is there are specialized loan products that exist that can underwrite based on the rental income of the property. So if I have a mortgage, I have a car loan, I think, okay, there's no way I can buy an investment property. No one's going to give me a loan. I'm going to walk in my local bank or my local branch, and they're going to say, okay, Jason, what's your current mortgage? What's your car loan? Oh, you don't qualify based on your debt to income ratio. They don't know that there's specialized loan products called DSCR loan, which is debt service coverage ratio loan, where I'm qualifying you for the mortgage based on the rental income of that property versus your personal income, right? So suddenly now you can build portfolio of 100 of investment properties because each property qualifies based on its own merit. You buy one investment property, right? Rent covers mortgage from day one, generates you cash flow. You wait 3, 4 years, you gain equity in the property, do a cash out refinance, take that money to put down payment on other property. That property is cash flow positive from day one, and the cycle repeats. So if you're a smart investor, you can really help that first investment property help you build a portfolio of investment property over 10 to 15 year period and build that generational wealth for you and your family. And people just don't know about it. And that's what we're trying to democratize.
All right. I love the idea. We've leveraged a DSCR loan, and it's nice because you don't have to give them all your personal info. And, it doesn't matter how much debt you already have leveraged with the properties you already have. Usually the rates are a little bit higher, right? But if you're able to cash flow it effectively, then I guess it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But also, I'll tell you, Jason, it's not that much higher either. If you
No.
think about an investment property loan from Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, conventional loans, the rates are going to be higher than what you're going to pay for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage for a primary home, right? If you compare an investment property loan from the JCs versus a DSCR loan, the rate differential you're talking about is 0.25%. Or,
Okay.
So it's very competitive.
So a lot of the people listening run property management companies. They've got a pool of investors. These are their clients. How do they leverage Home Abroad or Ziffy?
That's a great question, right? So we are also opening a marketplace for property managers, right? Because think about these foreign clients that are coming over to us, right? Think about domestic clients, right? A lot of these clients, no one wants to be a landlord, as I mentioned earlier, right? They're looking for a good way to maximize return on their investment or return on their cash, right? And they don't want to take the day-to-day hassle of being a landlord, right? That's
Right.
where property management comes in, right? And if you're a smart investor, if you're running this as a business, right, you got to have property management. That's what we tell our clients. You can't build a portfolio of 100 properties by managing each property yourself. You got to get property management in, right?
Yeah.
And what we are doing is we are trying to, open up a marketplace where, foreign investors, of course, they have no idea about whom to work at in the US. So they can connect to property managers in the US through our platform, right?
Okay.
But in addition, if you're a property manager and if you have clients who are looking for next investment and so forth, you can white label our Ziffy platform for your clients, right?
Okay.
To give them as your own tool. And if they come back to us, for a mortgage, we give you a referral fee. We give you up to 40 to 50 basis point on the loan amount as a referral fee. So that could be not only you're servicing your clients, you're giving them tools to help them find their next investment, which, by the way, you will end up managing as well. But you're also increasing your value prop by helping your client find the next investment and adding additional revenue stream to your overall portfolio, right? So it's a win-win situation for everyone.
So it becomes a
Absolutely.
profit center. Okay, so, and they can white label Ziffy. What about,
Yep.
is the Ziffy and Home Abroad databases, are these linked? Like, are these properties? Because, I think a lot of property managers listening are like, how can I get access to these foreign investors? Because I don't have
Yep.
that capability.
They're linked. It's just the branding, right? Because for foreign investors, we go with the brand name Home Abroad. And
Okay.
for domestic, of course, Home Abroad will not resonate with the US based customers, right? So that's where Ziffy comes in. And we are kind of actually actively going through a rebranding exercise where Home Abroad will become powered by Ziffy.ai. So at the end of the day, Ziffy is the overall umbrella brand, right? Ziffy.ai is our AI powered investment property search platform. And Home Abroad is the portion of Ziffy that's focused exclusively on foreign investors. But if you're part of our network, you get access to both clients. You get access to foreign investors, you get access to local investors.
Okay, perfect. So it sounds like property managers, if they're listed in this marketplace, it sounds like one, you might be feeding them some free business from the
Absolutely.
Home
Yep.
Abroad brand.
Yep.
They wouldn't be able to access otherwise, and they're able to support boots on the ground, helping with the property locally.
Yep.
And then they can also leverage Ziffy and do a white label thing for their existing clients and help get them and facilitate getting them into more property.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's very cool. So how does a property manager get into this marketplace? What are your qualifications?
So we of course want to make sure that our clients are taken care of, so we do initial vetting just to understand, you have the, I would say, capabilities and infrastructure to help service our clients. So everyone has a good positive experience, right?
Right.
And then once we kind of have that initial meeting to vet you out, you will become part of our network. We'll sign a good partnership agreement. You'll be part of the network, and then, you'll be listed prominently. If the customer is looking in that particular area, you'll be listed prominently within that ecosystem. Now, good news is we are vertically integrated shop, right? So client finds the property through our platform. We do the mortgage financing, right? And we know exactly when the customer is closing that transaction, right? So we will introduce the property manager at the right time. There's no point introducing a property manager right when they're starting their journey to find an investment property, right? But as soon as they close on that transaction, we'll introduce the property manager. We'll expose our marketplace to them and say, hey, by the way, you can find the right property manager to help you manage this property from our vetted property management list in, say, Phoenix, Arizona, or say, Dallas, Texas, right? Wherever the client is, closing that transaction, right? So we'll kind of introduce you in the right, point in that journey to make sure that, you have a high conversion as well.
So, how do you at Ziffy and HomeAbroad, how do you determine which markets you want to be in and focus on?
So the cool thing, Jason, is the customer decides for us, right? We are operating in 43 states, right? Out of 50 states in the US right now, right? There are, of course, hot markets, right? But, we let our algorithm, because now it's data, right? We know the data. We know what's the expected rent, which is our proprietary algorithm to calculate the expected rent across every property listed on the MLS right now for sale. What's your monthly mortgage payment is going to be. We are the mortgage shop, so we know what the monthly mortgage payment is going to be.
Yeah.
Rent minus mortgage is your cash flow, right? So you can basically punch in those numbers and you say, okay, I want to generate $500 in cash flow every month. Show me properties in entire US, show me properties in Midwest US, show me properties in California, show me properties in Texas, right? Whatever is your appetite, right? But you can kind of, find that right investment property with right investment objective, which I'd say market agnostic, right?
Yeah.
Find that property and then say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This doesn't make sense. And what we're adding to our AI layer, you can ask AI questions. Show me population growth trend in this area in the last 5 years. Show me rent, growth in this area in the last 5 years. Show me, is this a landlord friendly state? Like our AI will help you
Basically,
evaluate that
California.
property.
So basically, California's out, and Florida and Texas are in, or
Yep, yep. And that's what we see. That's what we see. Florida and Texas are two hot markets.
yeah.
Midwest is really picking up, because the
Okay.
property prices are lower, taxes are lower, rents are higher, right? So Midwest US is the new hot market from a rental standpoint,
Okay.
is what we're seeing. A lot of fix and flip opportunities as well. But Florida and Texas continue to be two hot states, rental property standpoint.
Got it. Okay. Now, these people that are, they're global investors. They're around the world. They're watching the news. They're seeing all the stuff that's going on in the U.S. I don't know what their perception is, but when they're watching all this, I'm sure that factors into their decision making in which states they want to be in.
Absolutely, 100%.
So they're like,
It does.
I don't want to be in California. They look like they're crazy there. And they're watching the news and they're seeing these, sanctuary cities with homeless people everywhere. And then they're like looking at like areas where it's more conservative and there's like more freedom and more options. Then they're like, maybe there. So perception, I would imagine, affects where they're choosing to invest as well.
Yeah, it totally does, right? And what we tell our clients, you got to think of real estate as a long-term investment game, right? For example, the rhetoric around current administration, right? From global investor standpoint, like, do I really want to put my money in the US at this point? What happens if X happens, Y happens, right? And what we tell our investor, right? The basics, why US, is a good market for real estate investment has not changed, will not change, right? It's going to be still remain a good market for real estate investment. The question is, where do you invest, right? And what are your objectives, right? You want to invest in a landlord-friendly state, right? You want to invest in states with, job growth, population growth, right? And you want to invest in state, in a market where you're getting good ROI on your cash invested, right? And that's a function of, appreciation and function of cash flow, right? That you're generating. Right? So till you have those data points figured out, right? In long term, it's going to be a viable investment, right? And you're going to make money. Like this is what we tell our investors, right? And when we explain them from that perspective, from that lens, I have not seen someone that has said, okay, US real estate investment is off my list, right? It's something that just still motivates and drives them.
Very cool. All right, I like it. And the best property managers, they're DoorGrow clients. Like we help them figure out how to actually do a good job. Most property managers suck in most markets. This
Absolutely,
is
yep.
the mission of property managers. They're like, I get a room of property managers. I'm like, how many of you believe all your competitors suck? Or most of them do. And everyone's hands go up. And everybody that comes to me and says, hey, I'm thinking of starting a property management business. I say, cool. And they tell me their story. They have investment properties and they tried property managers and most of them were terrible. And they decided to finally start a good company. And so there's this issue. So yeah, maybe we should get all the DoorGrow clients getting into your marketplace. So
I'm 100%. Let's talk about that. 100%.
all right, cool. Have you heard of Blanket? Have you heard of these guys?
Not really.
So I think I should connect you to Lior over at Blanket. They've got a really cool platform as well. And I think there's some synergy. They're basically like a retention platform for
Okay.
property managers. They were one of our sponsors at DoorGrow Live. And they've
Okay.
created a platform that allows their clients to see all of their, basically a white label portal for all their clients to have their portfolios. And it allows them to keep the properties in their portfolio by helping them find and access other owners when that owner wants to sell. So I
Awesome.
think
Okay.
there'd be some awesome synergy between these two
Yeah.
tools. And I'm always making connections. You guys don't see this, those that are watching the podcast behind the scenes. I'm always trying to connect different vendors to each other when I see some synergy. So, but I think that might be a cool connection. So, because I think what you're doing would work really nicely with that. And it'd be a really cool synergistic thing. So we'll just get HomeAbroad, Ziffy, Blanket, DoorGrow, and then some other vendors. We'll just start stacking. We'll create Voltron,
Yep.
this ultimate superpower to help this
Very
industry.
exciting. Hey, you grow together. That's how I've always believed. You grow together. It's a small industry. We got to help each other and we grow as a business together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I like what you're doing. What's the easiest way for a property manager to reach out? Which of the websites should they go to? How do they start getting vetted so they can get into this marketplace? And is this like a free thing because they're providing value, or do they pay to become part of the marketplace, or how does that work?
It's a free thing, right? They will be listed on a platform for free. So it's a two-way street, as I mentioned, Jason, right? So we're going to pay a referral fee to our property manager partners when they refer clients over to us. We're going to give them free tools to help facilitate that process. And vice versa, we'll collect a referral fee if our existing client signs up with them as well. It's a revenue stream for us too.
So if, let's say I have one of those clients that has a bunch of connections in a particular country like Israel or China or something like this, would there be an advantage to them to leveraging HomeAbroad to facilitate that rather than having to figure out all this work themselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because as I said, we are one-stop shop, right? So say, for example, you have an Israeli client that is just thinking about investing in US real estate, right? So what we do, we start from setting up their LLC, right? If you are US based, setting up an LLC, receiving an EIN is pretty easy, straightforward process, right? If you're a foreign national who doesn't have an SSN or an IT number, just getting an EIN number from an IRS, you're talking about faxing, you're talking about mailing, you're talking about 6 months, 6 to 8 weeks to get, your EIN number in mail. Now, we kind of have developed that expertise in this segment, so we can get an EIN and with an LLC setup for a foreign national not living in the US within a week, right? We can help them open a US bank account while they are in their home country, right? Of course, we'll need the US bank account as part of the mortgage process, but also they would need a US bank account to manage their property, right? When they invest in the US market, right? We can, of course, financing for foreign national, which is a bread and butter, right? So we help them with 75% LTV or 75% leverage to purchase an investment property in the US. So they only need to put 25% down payment on that investment property. As I mentioned, we don't look for any US credit history. We don't look for trade lines or credit history from their home country as well. It's a pretty straightforward process for foreign nationals. All we are looking for is, they have enough assets to close, which is 25% down payment plus closing costs, right? And if the appraisal comes in, right, where we want it to be, right? So whether they meet the ratio or the DSCR ratio where rent covers mortgage, right? Even if it does not, we have a sub-ratio DSCR program for them. So one way or the other, we will be able to do the loan just based on the property's income versus considering their personal income or assets in their home country, right? So we cover them right from helping setting up an LLC, opening US bank account, mortgage financing, connecting them with a local realtor, which is not just any realtor, but a realtor with CIPS, which is Certified International Property Specialist Designation by NAR, right? So they have gone through specialized training to work with foreign national global investors, right? And then property management connections, through a marketplace, right? So we are kind of one-stop shop for everything that foreign national would need to do to invest in the US real estate.
Interesting. So here's another random idea that comes up, and I don't know if this even relates. Maybe this is just completely out of left field. But occasionally I get clients that they've come from a foreign country to the US, and in order to to immigrate and to become integrated in the US, they have to start a business. And so they will buy a franchise sometimes, which usually in this industry, buying a property management franchise, I'm pretty outspoken about that. I think it's generally a bad idea. I get a lot of franchisees coming to me that have struggled. Like I know a gal that bought into a franchise. She's already invested 100K into this, and the franchise gave her poor strategy, and she only has one unit under management. And she's 100K in and over half a year invested into this. And she's concerned and freaking out. I've got another client. He's immigrated from the UK. He's built a property management business. They both built their business in Florida, by the way.
Nice.
So, the land of freedom and humidity. So is there some sort of advantage for some of these people that are overseas also? They're like, you know what? I like the idea of investing in the US, but I want to be in the US. Is there a way that they could build a business leveraging this, and could that be something that is facilitated as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason, and something like a lot of, our foreign clients ask us, right? So I'll give you a two-part answer to this question, right? One, if you are part of E-treaty countries, right? So US has a E-treaty, with I think UK, Japan, Australia, Canada, and a few other countries on that list, right? So if you're part of one of these countries where you have a E-treaty, with the US, you get a visa called E2 visa, where you can start a business in the US, get that visa to come manage the business. And a lot of our clients from these countries would start a LLC to manage 2 to 3 properties, show that okay, they're managing a real estate business, right, to kind of get that E2 visa, right? And so it's a great way for them to not only build, profitable business in the US, right, and benefit from the US real estate investment, but then also, try get a residency visa, based on this business. Property management kind of falls under the same aspect as well. Okay. Then other countries which are not part of the E-treaty, where you have something called an EB-5 visa, which is, where one of the key differences is that you have to just show that you've generated 10 employments and invested at least around $1 million in the US to generate those employments. Now, that is where, it becomes a little bit trickier, right? Because, you have to show that you brought that money in. Putting that money in real estate qualifies, right? But the important aspect is creation of 10 jobs. You have to show that you created 10 jobs through that investment, for that purposes. If you buy, like 10 properties or buy a multifamily unit and, you have a property management around it that employs 10 people to take care of it, technically it qualifies, right? You can also, buy a hotel, buy true commercial property that employs, 10 people to kind of, to qualify under that visa rule, right? But again, you're talking about $1 million investment, from your end, which is not, applicable for everyone, right?
Sure.
So there are a couple of ways, right? But for E2 visa, it becomes really easy, right? Because that job requirement criteria is not there. You have to show that it's a functional business. It's an active business, which could be a real estate business, right? And the qualification becomes a little bit easier from that perspective.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. If you run into these people, we should totally be homies. And if you run
Absolutely.
into these people, The thing we're really brilliant at DoorGrow is helping people avoid all the mistakes they make when they get their business
Yep.
started. We help them clean. We're like bar rescue for property managers, as I said in the intro. And for startups, we're ideal. We help them avoid all the pitfalls of the franchises. We help them come up with their own brand, their own website. We help them build out their hiring process. We help them make sure they get good people. Like, we help optimize the business and get the right systems installed. And so we really are like the ultimate franchise alternative. And I've just gotten tired of seeing the franchises hurting people. And so my mission is to get people to sign up with DoorGrow instead of going to these franchises, and set ourselves up as a franchise alternative, because we can help them get going with a lot less cash involved and a lot more health. And then we can help them, give them real strategies for growing their portfolios. And it sounds like this might be a really nice addition to any of my clients' strategies for growth, is to leverage Home Abroad, because they would love to have people that are hands off in another country, trusting you to just take care of stuff. That's an easy no-brainer type of client they would love to have. Yeah.
Absolutely, Jason. And we should talk after this podcast. We'll talk. I think there's a lot of synergies.
Okay, very cool. So, well, what else should property managers or investors listening to this show know about Home Abroad or Ziffy that we haven't covered? Or what questions do people tend to ask that they're concerned about?
Yeah, I think, one of the things, that we also advise our clients, right? It's not about, property management eating into my cash flow, right? Because that's something that we see, people concerned about, or people, like want to kind of, want to do it by themselves because they want to make sure they maximize their cash flow, right? But what we tell our clients, at the end of the day, you got to think of it as a business, right? And what's your net return, and how do you value your time, right? What's the hourly rate that you assign to yourself, right? And what else you would be doing if you're not managing 5 properties on your own, right? That's an opportunity cost, right? So think of this more from an opportunity cost standpoint versus, okay, it's eating into my cash flow, because that opportunity cost can help you five more properties, right? That can, overall amplify your return on your cash invested versus nickel and diming, the money that you're trying to save, right? And, when we kind of, talk to them about their ROI, return cash, we want them to kind of consider this as an expense that goes into it. Because at the end of the day, even though we are not the property management providers, right, we partner with your clients, so to speak, Jason, right? We are trying to do what's in best interest of that client in order to build that real estate investment portfolio, right? So that's something that, just want to reiterate to you, to the listeners of your podcast, right? Why partner with us, because that's something that we inherently advise our clients, and we position property management as one of the pillars they need to really succeed to build a successful real estate investment portfolio.
So you kind of insulate, because I know there's some property managers listening, and they're like, man, some of these foreign investors are such cheapos. They're like so cheap, and they complain about everything, and they're really difficult. You kind of insulate them from that with your organization. And, in property management, really, it is a no-brainer. I mean, there's a lot of properties that a lot of these investors on their own probably wouldn't even accurately raise rent. And so if they didn't raise rent over the last 2 to 3 years, for example, they're probably 10% below market rate anyway. And so if the property manager just kept rent where it actually is in the marketplace, property management basically is free.
Yeah, it's paid for itself.
Offset. It's a no-brainer. And so, I think the biggest mistake investors can make, period, if you're an investor listening to the show, is to not use a property manager. A good one, because there are bad ones. But if you can find a good one, that is the biggest game changer, because it takes all the work off your plate and you make just as much money.
Absolutely. And another thing for your listeners, Jason, right? You'd be surprised how few people know about the specialized loan products for real estate investors, right? So if your client is with you managing one property and is thinking in my head, oh, I already have a mortgage on my primary, I have another investment property here, no way in the world I can buy another investment property. It's an education gap. It's a knowledge gap, right? So if they can help educate, and that's where like Ziffy and HomeAbroad comes in, because we will educate them on your behalf. You retain the relationship, you retain your brand, right? We'll white label it, but like not only show them properties that will give them their next cash flow investment, but also educating them, okay, for this loan to qualify, I don't need to see your debt to income ratio. I'm going to qualify based on that property's income. And, the only upfront cost is an appraisal cost, right? But us being the mortgage shop, vetting that, okay, this property gives you cash flow or from a conservative standpoint is good for you at the end of the day because, you won't invest if the property is not cash flow positive from day one, right? So something that people don't know, and there's a gap there.
Yeah, we've had some lenders on talking about DSCR loans in the past, and yeah, a lot of people just aren't aware of it as an option.
Yeah.
And so property managers, if they can have a partner like yourself to, educate them on these alternate sources of funding and methods of getting cash to invest in real estate, yeah, it's going to open up the door. Not only that, but I like the idea of those because it kind of creates this veil of protection. So it's not an asset in your name if there ever is a liability with the rental property.
Absolutely.
They don't even
Yep.
know who the owner is. It's an entity, and there's kind of a shield there of protection. And so there's some additional advantages to going that route as well. So
Absolutely. And like majority of our clients would vest the title in an LLC for the reason that you just mentioned. You always need to have that, protection around you in a litigation-rich country. So,
got it. Cool. Well, hey, I think this is a really awesome idea, Amresh. It's great to have you on the DoorGrow show. Any parting words, or how can people get in touch, and how can they find out more?
sure, so if you're a property management company, you can get in touch with us at partner@homeabroadinc.com or partner@ziffy.ai. My personal email address is amresh.singh@homeabroadinc.com. You can shoot me an email as well. Website is homeabroadinc.com for Home Abroad and ziffy.ai for our Ziffy brand.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for coming on the show. So those of you listening, if you've ever felt stuck or stagnant, you want to take your property management business to the next level, reach out to us at doorgrow.com. Also, be sure to join our free community just for property management business owners at doorgrowclub.com. We reject 60 to 70% of the people that apply to join that group. And if you found this even a little bit helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. Until next time, remember the slowest path to growth is to do it all alone. So let's grow together. Bye, everyone.